Hello.
Hello.
Hey. Great to meet you.
Nice
Are
to meet
you, have you been the one in Discord? No.
you. No,
Inoke?
I have not. I am.
Okay.
Do you know Jordan Outreach?
Ah, yes.
Yes,
Are you from the relay team or?
I'm from the relay team. Yes.
Okay. Nice. Great to meet you. I'm Tim.
Nice to meet you. Hello.
Hey.
Hello.
So unfortunately, it looks like Ricky can't come. Okay. Okay. So Ricky got COVID. Ricky, the core maintainer so far, I would say, with the most knowledge isn't here, which doesn't mean that this meeting can't happen. Ricky and I talked quite a bit in the last days where things can go, and yeah, it's suboptimal, but we will make it work. Okay, we can just wait a few minutes. I'm preparing the Google Doc for our notes. And then we can get started in 2-3 minutes. Okay.
Are there usually is there usually more attendance, or is there usually just like 3 people?
The attendance is very, let's say, variable. So we have usually just Ricky and me actually, and maybe 1 or 2 more people. It's not like the main GraphQL working group where we have 20 people coming. Although I promoted this on Twitter last week and in the GraphiQL Discord channel, I don't know, we might have to promote it even more. So yeah. Okay. But that's fine because we have enough capacity to work on this. So I'm just sharing this with everyone.
What are you working on, Thomas? Are you also from GraphCDN, or
Yes, Tim hooked me into this. I'm also working as software engineer at GraphiQL, and I'm probably gonna also contribute to the new design and the stuff that's planned. So that's why I'm here. Also, first time attending for me.
Me as well.
Which is nice that the 2 of you are here. So, okay, I'll just quickly I just created a fairly simple agenda here. I'm just moving this over to Google Docs. So I try to get this inspired by the main GraphQL working group. We're not there yet. Last year we didn't have any GraphQL working group meetings, and I joined this process here, I think 3 months ago, something like that. So since then we're still in the process of defining things and making having a proper process. So bear with us for chaos. Okay. Okay. Just quickly creating the sections. For the design update. And is your name, is it Mofi? Or how do I say it? Mofi. I guess from your side, it would be important to talk about like a plugin system and how that could tie into your internal tooling at Meta, right?
Yes, as well as how the plugin system can enable the relay compiler on GraphiQL in the first place.
Okay. You you also have this like compiler AST viewer tool, right? I think Jordan even implemented that. Yeah, he showed me that link. Yeah, good. So then I will just start with a quick design update, and then we all have like the same context, and I suggest we talk about the plugins. Design update should just take like 5 minutes probably. Let's say 10. Plugins, I will just put 20 minutes now. Then we can talk about the path to V2. Okay, good. How big is the relay team currently?
I think it's 7 or 8 people right now, but we're trying to grow.
Whoa, that's quite a bit.
How many people are
Okay.
working on GraphiQL? Are y'all contributors of GraphiQL as well?
Yeah, I think that the core contributors probably currently like 3 or something. Yeah. So exactly. Yeah, I'm also contributing. Thomas will work on it full time for quite a bit. We will sponsor that work at as GraphCDN. Ricky is also working on it, and I think there are a few people in the community who are interested in joining. Yeah. Okay, then let's get started. Do you have access to the document?
Yes.
Good. This beautiful markdown to links. Feel free to clean it up, but I will clean it up later. I don't want to waste our time with this. So thanks everyone for coming. Let's do a quick introduction of everyone. I think it's clear with the guidelines. We all agree to them. Let's do a quick intro. Just say our name, where we are from. We did it already, but just to follow the protocol. Hi, I'm Tim, and I'm from GraphCDN. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Mofe. I'm from Meta.
I'm Thomas, and I'm also from GraphCDN.
Okay, nice. So yeah, I would like to give you a quick overview where we're at with the design. The design, just to give you some context here. I think it was in January. I think I joined the first working group meeting with Ricky, and we said that GraphiQL at V1 is out for a long time, and that we have planned a V2, and there have been a bunch of design proposals, ideas out there. And so we signed up for creating the design for the V2 because I believe as it's a UI that we're building, it makes sense to do this design driven. And so we iterated on the design a few times now. And the last, I think it was last week, Wednesday or Thursday, I presented it in the whole GraphQL working group, where we got a bunch of great feedback. And so I want to give you a quick overview of the latest iteration we have. And then I would directly love to jump into concretes with you. Quickly open it with another browser for whatever reason. Yeah. Okay. So I'll share my screen. Here we go. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yes, this is me with plugin title. I changed the font here because I didn't have a font. Sorry, that's not the planned design. So the idea is that we have a versatile design that supports all the needs of the community. If we look into the requirements that people have, so we have a project for the V2 roadmap, and there are tons of plugins that people would like. For example, a YAML renderer, base64, tooltip renderer, and so on. And we want to at the same time make it flexible enough, but also we need to set some boundaries somewhere. Not everything can be a plugin. So we have thought about designated spots for plugins. One of these will be here on the left side. The base version of this is the Docs Explorer. And that is being shipped with GraphiQL as is, but of course people can put in their own stuff. In VS Code, you're probably familiar with it. They have these icons on the left side as well. And if you toggle them, it will toggle the sidebar. It will not toggle the whole view. That's a different behavior. And so we said that we would like to keep that behavior consistent, that if you provide plugins, that they are only and they are available as icons here, that they will only influence the sidebar. However, you probably still want to influence the whole view or at least the result pane. For that, so we now have the first draft, the opinion here that you're not able to control the whole view or replace it, but rather only the whole result view. So far, the use cases we saw, it would be sufficient for these use cases. For example, if you have an AST Explorer, and Mofe, you can, I would love to see your perspective about that in a bit. But if you have, for example, an AST Explorer, and instead of seeing the result JSON, you would see an AST here of the query, then you can toggle here on the top between GraphQL editor and different options. This is still a quick design that our designer quickly added after the feedback we got last week. So I'm just checking where we have the drop down for that. Maybe I'm not finding it currently. Yeah, no, not seeing it. But I mean, yeah, you can imagine if you click on GraphQL editor here, you can choose between, as a drop down, has a few options in there. To, for example, see an AST Explorer. By default, I don't necessarily see us shipping a GraphQL, an AST Explorer, but it's something that people should be able to extend. So that's that on that level. Then here we have space for icons. This will be the prettier icon. We even talked about it already that this might even, so there has been desire in the community to move more towards variables, GraphQL variables, and this prettier here function could even automatically turn inline arcs into variables. That could be part of it, could be an opinionated version we put in here. Variables and headers, we thought a lot about it back and forth, how we could change them. For example, hiding variables by default and putting headers somewhere else, but after all, they need to be accessible, people need to see them. And so for now, our proposal is just to keep it as it is in the current GraphiQL as a bottom like tab as a bottom tab here. That's mostly that. So again, we have options to add icons here, which will then perform potential actions on the editor level. Instead of just variables and headers, we can also have more editor tooling that we attach here on the bottom. And also for the result tooling, we could have more here that we could have like tabs. So that's the rough setup. Just to give you a few points on the feedback that we got, people are not yet sure if this inline description here makes sense, if it scales. The reason we made it like this is that you want to probably first get an overview over all your fields before you dive into them. And so the idea is that you would get a tooltip for the description. We always need to be aware that description can be a full markdown. An advantage of having this fixed height is, I mean, you have really big schemas at Meta, and we could imagine, for example, a virtualized implementation there where we don't need to render everything. That is like if you have thousands of types and fields, we could just show the ones that are in the view or just render the ones in the view. In order to do a virtualized implementation, usually you need deterministic heights of the elements. And if we would render arbitrary markdown here, that's very hard to calculate. It's possible, but very hard. It's a nice side effect of this design that we could do virtualization, not saying we need to do that on day one. Quite relevant also for the big schemas. I'm not sure if we have, yeah, by the way, this is if you want to add a tab in the default design. Lee Byron made the good point that you don't want to necessarily take away this space here on the top, because many people might just need a one query editor. So that's why we would put the plus here in the beginning. And then once you need tabs, you can just go in here and then you just say add tab, and then it turns into this kind of tab view here where you have multiple tabs. But as we all know, GraphiQL didn't have tabs until just, I don't know, 2 weeks ago or something. And we all survive without them. So we want to make that still that use case a first-class citizen. I excuse my quick jumping around, but I'm not finding what I'm looking for. One thing that we also want to provide, we just don't have it here in the designs. So the idea is that this little menu here will give us a way to we had one idea is that you only show the selected items here in the sidebar. So again, the schema can have thousands of types and fields, but maybe I just need a little subset of that. And that will also help a lot again, for example, for Meta, if you have these huge schemas. And if you're sharing a graphical link where there is, again, thousands of types, but you only have a small query, by default, we could only show the selected fields and types on the left side to make it render much quicker. Yeah, that's mostly it. And the other thing, just to Mofai, I'm not sure how familiar you were with those concepts that we came up with. Ah, here you go. Reload schema and show selected only. There we go. Reload schema, we didn't find a natural nice spot for it, so we said we would rather put it on a shortcut, and in general encourage shortcuts as much as possible. Maybe even have a dedicated shortcut view where we show like a little key icon, and then you click on it, and then we show you all the shortcuts. We want people to obviously be productive with this tool. Reload schema, especially in local development, quite important. Yeah, just more that you have the context for the ambitions that we have for the Docs Explorer. So there has been this effort from RunGraph. They built this graphical explorer. Okay, you're familiar with it, where they have this where you can build up your query here on the side. Yeah, so we like that, and I mean it's a tree structure basically, right? And if you want, the docs could also be a tree structure. And so we looked at the similarity and said, how about we merge them into one, mixing the two concerns. But as we want to save space, and so if we already need to show tree structures, why not show them all in one? So yeah, the idea is that, again, sorry that I messed up the fonts here. The idea is that we have those mixed. It's a quite ambitious goal. We will need to just build it and see how much it scales. In particular, if you have deep queries, how much does it scale here on a horizontal level? That's really something to figure out. To be fair, this scales quite well for the graphical explorer from RunGraph, so I'm also confident that we can make it work, but it's just something to be aware of, that this is a quite ambitious concept. But so far people loved it. Yeah. And just as a quick overview, again, we want to have the minimal graphical that you can embed in your docs, and also the beautiful dark theme that I again destroyed by doing some stuff. I will fix that, sorry about that. Tooltips and so on, nothing special here. Yeah. Okay, so that was the review. All in all, people are excited about it. Just need to make sure that it scales, which is exciting to have you here, Mofai. because we can talk about these big schemas now. Yeah, okay. So that's that.
Thank you for the presentation. Yeah.
Yeah. So then, let's talk about the needs for the plugins. Could you just walk us through what you have, what kind of needs you have internally at Meta, what tooling you build, and yeah, what's the current state for you?
I can primarily only speak for the Relay team. I know that Meta has its own team of engineers maintaining Meta's GraphiQL. So as far as Relay's needs go, the primary thing that we want to enable is being able to get the Relay compiler running, which transforms graphical text into an inline version. And it'll also transform some directives into graphical syntax. So ideally, we should be able to get plugin support on the query editor, query fragment editor side. Is that something that you can envision, like being able to support?
Yeah, so just to understand, would that look like similar to the compiler explorer that you have? It's basically, do I understand correctly? It's about, I'm just sharing here, being able to build basically this compiler explorer, but just with the graphical.
It's more in the document. We want to be able to write Relay syntax and transform that into GraphQL syntax. So
Okay.
in the ideal case, we would be able to write GraphQL incompatible syntax so that we can experiment with things like named fragment spreads, for example, is an idea we've been trying to explore. Alternatively, if it totally makes sense if you're not able to support GraphQL incompatible syntax, because I'm sure you have your own parser and AST representation as well. So if you're not able to support GraphQL incompatible syntax, then we'd at least like to get, from the plugin side, we like to get a string of what the document is before sending it to the server, so that we can transform the Relay GraphQL into an inline optimized version, a flattened version. If that makes sense.
This is interesting because first of all, we obviously, and when you talk about incompatible, can you give some examples? Do you just have like custom directives, or is it really completely different than GraphQL, than ordinary GraphQL?
So we like to experiment with incompatible syntax. So for example, named directive spreads, when we spread a directive, we want that to be from the client side accessible as a linked field. So we could annotate this as a directive, but if we wanted to, push the boundaries of GraphQL syntax, we could annotate this as just an aliased linked field.
What do you mean with a linked field?
Oh, so for example, here best friend is a linked field of user. So it's a way for user to have a selection that references another type. So right now, linked fields only represent what the server gives back to us, but Relay wants to be able to inject custom fields that are not returned from the server.
Ah, I see, kind of stitching that together in a way. In the Relay case, wouldn't that be covered by a custom schema that potentially for Relay, you could have a schema builder that takes the server schema and adds some custom fields on top? Is that still like a valid GraphQL schema, or is that like a special thing?
We can, but GraphQL does these transforms on the client side. So before sending it to the server.
Interesting.
So we
okay.
on the way out. So we'll transform this document, for example, by inlining every fragment And so we could deduplicate selections whenever possible.
Mm.
We'd also like to implement behavior. I don't know if, I think Jordan might have mentioned, we'd like to be able to throw if a field that we want to be required is missing. So this is purely on the client side. We want to be able to parse the syntax, and, the returned results from the server, and read our
Okay.
yeah,
I see.
custom.
Okay, so you basically, yes, you said you have client-specific things that you want to pass out. Okay, I'm just wondering, I agree that it would be quite easy for us to add a hook before things are sent to the server. I know that I think existing GraphiQL has a fetch override that could solve it. Not sure where we have it, but if you use the React component yourself, then you can override that.
Right.
That would already at least solve that case, right? But we also want you to not have everything red with the squiggly lines here that it's like incorrect, right? So you would need to be able to, but even that should be covered because you can provide your own GraphQL schema at least.
Yes, we'd also like to be able to, on some like debounced, edit of the document, we'd like to be able to run the relay compiler so that we can give compiler diagnostics. So not only during the operation execution, but during document editing as well.
Okay, so that means if we would now look again into the design, that could mean that on the response tab, we might have different options here. That here you could choose kind of the rendered relay query or something. And if I'm editing here on a debounce, you just want to have a hook so you can rerun that, so you can rebuild that result.
Yes, and validate that the syntax is correct for the document. Yeah, I imagine it might be frustrating for users too.
Okay, just to understand the syntax that you want kind of custom syntax basically that is not like quote unquote valid GraphQL part of the query here.
Ideally, but it's totally fine if that's not possible. We can work with annotating behaviors with directives instead.
Okay, because what we need to look into is that the Monaco GraphQL plugin is like a web worker that is separate, which runs based on the normal GraphQL, and it will be a bit tricky to build a plugin system that also enables adjusting that web worker. It's possible. We would need to think about that. It's an interesting use case, but we just need to find a way to override it somehow. Not yet sure how we would do that. I need to look a bit into, or we need to look into the Monaco GraphQL API. Yeah, okay, interesting.
We'd also like to be able to intercept at the response side because the GraphQL query that we send to the server is a flattened, deduplicated, optimized, transformed version. We need to be able to transform it back into what the user expects before displaying the result.
Okay. Again, if we give you a fetch hook, I think that would be covered because you can just change the result. So the part where we change the query before it's sent to the server and where you adjust the result before it's shown in the UI, that sounds easy to me with a fetch hook. The custom validation, that will be a bit more tricky, and we would need to see how that is incorporated into the GraphQL language service that's also being used here. That's a bit more tricky. If we can maybe have looks like you would even need to be able to provide your own parser or override the GraphQL parser and even validation and so on. Interesting. I guess you have tooling for that. You wrote your own parser for your own GraphQL queries. So that means it's only about giving you the right hooks where you could potentially tell the GraphQL language service used in relay and GraphiQL, use this as the parse function, use this as whatever. Okay. It's quite an advanced use case, but to be honest, makes total sense. And I mean, we also wanna, this will always exist, that there are people who wanna push the boundaries of GraphQL, which is important anyway. And we also need to kind of keep that in mind. Like GraphQL is never in this and finished state. There will always be new stuff that we're working on. So I think that's still quite important. Okay. And just to understand, at Meta, do you use the ordinary graphical inside that is like published on NPM, or is it a fork, or how is that?
From my understanding, it's a fork, but I'm not really working on that at all.
Okay. Makes sense. Good. Yeah. So to summarize, most important part is really being able to manipulate the request and the response, basically.
Yes.
And then optimally even your own validation and parsing that would even be integrated into GraphiQL so that the inline hints, tooltips, all of that would work. I can tell you that sounds a bit ambitious. Let's see, at least that it's not a big error and it's like succeeding and parsing. That would be good. Yeah. Okay.
The easiest case would be for us to just get a string of the document string. But if you give us an AST, we can parse that back to a string and run our.
Yeah, we will probably have both. And in this fetch API, we will give it to you because we will need to pass this anyway. The AST here, again, I need to see how that ties into the Monaco plugin, but I know that in the current GraphiQL, we're doing exactly what you talked about earlier, having a debounce, and then we're just rebuilding the AST in the background. For example, also for our tab name extraction here. Where is it? Anyway, the name of the tab is being created from the name of the query, for example, and for that we need to pass it anyway. Okay, interesting. Good. Okay, so then I think it seems like we have your use cases covered.
Yes, yeah.
And then how big is actually the meta schema? How many types do you have?
It's huge. From my understanding, on the scale of thousands, hundreds of, tens of thousands at least. I'm not sure beyond that.
Okay, we will need some
it's
really
so big that we have
features.
to stitch together, I think, on the scale of tens of documents, because our files actually can't get that large. So our GraphQL schema lives in sharded files, and we'll stitch together when compiling.
Oh, and is really Relay used for all GraphQL clients, or do you also have more lightweight stuff? Just asking completely.
Relay is used for most of our web GraphQL clients, and we have separate teams for mobile GraphQL clients.
Okay, nice, awesome. Well, yeah, this is awesome. So yeah, then I'm happy that we have this use case captured here, and we will make sure to support it as well as we can. Great.
Yes, definitely. I was also curious, for the plugin interface, what did you envision that being?
We don't have that defined yet, but I would basically just naively say that you have a bunch of props for the main graphical component, where you can provide your definitions of the icon. You basically just pass in a certain interface, right, that we define, a render function for the plugin pane, an icon, and so on. I think that would be fairly straightforward. Same for a custom fetch function. You just provide a custom fetcher, which is a callback, and then we just pass you in all the context. Just a bunch of hooks basically that you can get from the main graphical component.
That makes sense. And then the plugins, would they get re-rendered if they're dependent on the editor state, for example?
That's a good question. that really depends on our state management in the new implementation. I used to implement the GraphQL playground, and there we used Redux with reselect, or what was the name, and there we only re-rendered if data dependencies changed. I think that it would be sensible to re-render the plugins when on a debounce. Or what would be your requirement there?
We don't have strong requirements. We'd like to show an AST Explorer, for example, in the plugin. And that would need to reflect the state of the editor on a debounce. So really the results of our compilation would be
okay.
shown.
I mean, you are controlling the plugin, the rendering. So if you change something in your component, it should just normally re-render, right? With hooks, if you have any hooks in there, or whatever. I think that should be fine. Yeah. Okay. Anything else about the plugins?
No, I think that's all we had in mind. I also remember part of the proposal was to be able to inject some JavaScript inside of GraphiQL 2.0. Is that something that was cut out, or is that something that we're still interested in?
I think that yes, and so the thing is that it's not the first thing we would build for the let's say alpha or first release. I don't think we would build that. The first goal is to have basically feature parity plus the base design that we came up with here, including like the ambitious Explorer here. But I can definitely see that step by step adding more functionality there. Do you have a use case for that?
Oh, no, I was just curious. We have some documentation that could probably benefit from that, but
Okay. So basically being able to like write a JavaScript here, and you might have whatever TypeScript autocompletion or something, or
yeah, like JS Fiddle, but GraphQL version, I guess.
I see. Yeah. That's a good idea. Yeah, no, we don't have that planned, but step
That
by
makes
step.
total sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not within the
And I also think that the long-term goal would be to have a plugin system that allows community plugins that are awesome and can be shared. I mean, one day even like a marketplace and becoming the VS Code of GraphQL, but step by step getting there. So yeah, that you could build something like that. Yeah. Okay. Good. Anything else?
That's all the concerns that I had. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so we will actually plan the implementation now. You can stick around more, but it's also fine if you want to leave. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about the implementation. There are many paths to implement this. And I will just share a bit the discussions we had so far, and then we can just discuss what makes sense to us. After all, I think, Thomas, you will actually do a majority of the work. So you can decide in like the actual order. I don't care too much about. So there are a bunch of things here. First of all, this is quite a different design and different tool than what we had so far. And I could imagine this would be a full-time job for a few weeks, depending on how crazy you go. And we also don't want to block this like too long and then have this big bang release. So both Ricky and Lee encouraged us strongly to do a step-by-step approach, and I agree with that. To give some context, there has been work on the graphical hooks-based implementation already a while ago. They called it, I will quickly show you, in my screen, they added GraphiQL to RFC context. So they were using a context-based approach for state. And so they were also switching to theme UI. There are a bunch of things that we need to take into account. One is obviously long-term, we want to go to Monaco. We want to have a theming support here that works for our users mostly, because what we like, which CSS library we use, I'm not that concerned. It's really how can people customize this. I talked about it with Ricky, and Ricky recommends us to do as much with CSS variables as possible, just because they're the most, the least opinionated tool out there. However, we want to support them. I think CSS variables doesn't really dictate the concrete framework we would use. We talked about something like Radix UI. Ricky looked into that, but also potentially stitches for beautiful for the actual implementation. What matters is that it's easy to extend from outside. And so from this code base here in this folder, Ricky does not recommend us to just release this code here, but just to use it as a reference. In our main implementation of GraphiQL, what we can do, we can step-by-step move components over and modernize them. As you see, they're still using the old React API, and just moving them over to Hook step-by-step is already a great approach. Yeah, and so I suggest the following, and I would like to hear your opinions around that, especially Thomas, that we are moving the current code mirror-based implementation as much as possible to the new design first and release that. So with that, we are already able to provide the community value, even though it's on V1. Maybe not everyone will switch to V2, and it's a good step forward towards our the end state. What we see in Figma is like the end state. Then getting there will take a bit of work. I still need to talk to Julian, our designer, how we can take the current Docs Explorer in GraphiQL and still modernize it without completely rethinking everything. There can be an intermediate step. So first, get the current design in V1, release it. Next step would be already replace Monaco. The Monaco code mirror to Monaco replacement is a justification for a V2. The new design itself is not necessarily, because it can still be fully compatible. But the Monaco replacement is definitely V2 worthy, because it would be a breaking change. People might need to introduce a web worker and so on for that to work properly. And then that could still be the old Doc Explorer, already all new design, Monaco, release that one. Then the last step is our ambitious new Doc Explorer, which I see as the most risky part here and probably the one that takes the most time, basically working on that afterwards. That is like the rough proposal. And during the Monaco move, we can step-by-step modernize components. Yeah. So yeah, what do you think about that? Okay, Thomas gets a call. I will just give Thomas a minute. Morphe, does that make sense to you? Even though you're not necessarily implementing it, unless you have time, by the way. If you have time, we're always welcoming some contributions.
No, I was just sitting around because I was curious to hear about GraphQL 2.0 implementation. I don't have.
Okay.
I was curious. I guess since Thomas is not here, I'm mostly a front-end noob. Why are we switching to Monaco? What are problems with code mirror we're experiencing?
Yeah, so the interesting thing with Monaco is, first of all, there is a big, like the most advanced experience is currently we have in VS Code. And a lot of efforts that go into a Monaco GraphiQL effort, they will just benefit both VS Code and the front end part here, plus the so Code Mirror is way more, let's say, primitive. So in Code Mirror, you get a hook where you can say, okay, someone did maybe control space to open the tooltip, but you need to render the tooltip, you need to calculate it, you need to put in your own language server. Monaco as a whole system runs, it does that for you. That's the advantage of Monaco. It's more heavyweight as well, but you have a lot of editor specific things that you would need to re-implement in Code Mirror that are already present in Monaco. For example, you have these collapse that you can like press the caret symbol, and if you have a block that you can collapse that, all that stuff is there in Monaco. We don't need to build it anymore. So that's why the Monaco is probably a good idea to move there.
Thank you.
Yep.
Sorry, got a call
No problem.
from my new car, and my headphones are connected to my iPhone, and then hell went loose. Sorry. What did I miss?
Mofei was just asking about the difference or why we are interested in using Monaco over Code Mirror, and I just gave a quick overview there. So I will quickly repeat, Thomas, just that you're getting back into the zone.
Sorry.
We have the my proposal, moving as much as possible of the current GraphiQL over to the new design, kind of an in-between state, release that. Then move over to Monaco and modernize components, but with still the old Doc Explorer, release that. And then do the new Doc Explorer as the last step, basically. So yeah, what are your thoughts around
that? I like it in general. I think it makes sense to try to like do as much as possible without, or like and see where are the actual breaking changes gonna be once we switch or once we wanna do a version 2. So something like modernizing the React code and implementing the new design, at least the parts of it, the general theme, stuff like that, should definitely be possible within the bounds of the current V1. I think the Docs Explorer is not really super sophisticated in the current version. So yeah, just putting this in some new fonts, some new colors, probably wouldn't be like too much overhead, like because it's that's the only thing that you're gonna throw away afterwards when you build a new Docs Explorer. But I think the overhead it's not too much. Yeah. So in general, I like it.
Okay, awesome. Again, this was also highly the recommendation of Lee Byron that we don't do the Big Bang. And I mean, what happened in the last time we had this branch was this React 16 branch never actually saw the light of the world. Okay, so there are a bunch of things we need to figure out on this path. Bunch of decisions. And I would say when we move to a new design, obviously thinking about a better way of styling. Currently, it's one or a few big CSS files, and I think we can do better. So I think a big decision would really be, because first step would be moving to a new design, deciding on the CSS solution here. And as much as possible support. So like Ricky mentioned, they used theme UI in the past, and that is an option, but maybe the easiest is really just that people do CSS variables, and we just document that well. Yeah, on the new styling, I know that Ricky played around in the last days with radix and stitches. And in my understanding, you would be able to do stitches, with CSS variables. But that is something to figure out.
Yeah. So at least from the so I keep it as simple as possible. Would be my preferred option. So I actually so CSS, first of all, CSS variables for theming makes a lot of sense. I guess it's now supported in all major browsers. So probably the simplest way to just use the built-in method for theming. That's built into the browser. Then I'm not sure how sophisticated we should get in terms of using styling libraries. I also don't know how or if something like Radix UI, I never had a closer look at it, but I'm not sure if we really need it in terms of the components that we use. And okay, maybe we do have some dropdowns and stuff like that in there. That would be nice to have it also like accessible and to not care and need to re-implement or reinvent the wheel there. So it could be something. As I said, I never looked into Radix UI in particular, so can't have a real opinion on that. Apart from that, I don't know if we need to go for something like stitches or if plain CSS or maybe CSS modules wouldn't be enough, because I think that's like the most simple thing, and also for thinking about future contributors, it's probably easier to if it's just plain CSS without so basically being able to contribute without having to learn a new CSS framework first. My thoughts on it.
Yes. So just taking notes here. In my understanding, you wouldn't even need stitches to do the CSS variables, right? We would just change our CSS file. It's a native CSS feature, right? Okay, Wi-Fi. So then I think it's totally fine to keep the CSS modules that we have currently. That's like this exact same distribution of module of CSS. Everyone uses that already. As soon as we go with something like stitches, we need to see, okay, what's the build step and what's the output? How do people include the CSS and so on? I think I'm totally fine with that. It's also very accessible because people can just see one file and they can just go in there for their own customization on top of CSS variables. So that means the first step could really be implement a new design where we have an intermediate doc explorer design. I will talk to Julian about that. Just keep the existing CSS solution and just introduce CSS variables for the theming, so that we are and basically implement the dark and light theme for that, and that's it. For dark and light theme, we might need to introduce a theme switch. So that we can still use system theme as default, but people can switch around, and that's pretty much it. Okay, nice. Yeah, I think that's a really great step, and that is also sounds feasible. It's not like something that will take weeks, but getting to the new design, that sounds feasible within reasonable amount of time.
I mean, given
code mirror.
Given the existing components in there, I think it's fairly easy because there's no sophisticated drop-downs yet or doc explorers with nested hierarchies. So it's all rather still quite simple.
Okay. Nice. So, okay. So that means just when the decision's made, we have the following steps. implement new design with existing code base, introduce CSS variables for theming, keep existing CSS approach. So that's kind of step one. Then
maybe it's actually a bit more than that. Maybe that's a good chance to also modernize the component code into more modern React, and also to extract the CSS for these components into CSS modules.
also
Then you could
option,
go like through component by component, and like do step by step until we modernized, or we went through all components, have a new design for all of them, and also have a modern React version for it.
yeah.
Then it's good. Yeah.
So for CSS modules, I would assume that the because currently I think we just have like a app CSS, yeah. So we would just instead have a few modules that are compiled into an app CSS. That's basically the same then. We have these currently, yeah.
I guess it's already like multiple CSS files, right?
Yeah.
Or is it really one big file?
It's a
Can't
bunch of
remember.
files. Yeah. And also just to have a quick understanding how they are included here. They are just imported all in there for the CDN code, yeah. And also for the for the Vite example, yeah. Yeah, I mean, we can keep that structure for now, and then step by step. It's something to align on with Ricky. We can talk with Ricky about this. Okay, so we have that step by step, component by component. Good. So then that's the first release. That's kind of these are part. So second release would be
First release probably still version 1 then, because there's no
version
changes.
1. Exactly. Still V1, no breaking changes.
Yeah.
Google Docs is so much better than Notion editing. Second release, we say that move editor part to Monaco. First V1, V2. Keep docs as they are. And then third release, V2, move to new sidebar, basically. And what we can also do for the V2 release, introduce plugin hooks. They don't necessarily need to directly be there for the V1. We can see could also be an in-between step, doesn't need to be coupled. I will just say potentially in between, introduce plugin hooks. Yeah, that we just talked about, at least the hooks for the fetch, which already covers most of the needs of the relay team. And to be fair, it's maybe good to do that during the Monaco, because with Monaco things will change quite significantly. And I don't want to first give people hooks and plugins, and then we do a week later we do Monaco and like, oops, we need to remove them or something. That is at least something. The Monaco should be part of the context, and that we need to make a good decision there. Yeah.
Something I just remembered. I think there is like this, how's it called? Compound component pattern currently, where you can, if you use the React version, where if you render the graphical component, then you can render some of its parts as child components, which I remember slightly some code comment of we want to deprecate this. can't remember. Would be good if Ricky was here, but maybe in general, something for the first release also to spot some deprecations and add warnings that this will no longer work for V2, basically giving all users a chance to have a version that warns them about everything that will break before they actually upgrade to V2.
Mm-hmm. Okay. We can follow up on that with Ricky. Yeah. Okay. Great. Okay, this is awesome. Then I think this is a great plan.
Yeah.
So I can write this up in a GitHub issue. The plan that we have here, we'll send that over to Ricky as well, and share that with the rest in the graphical Discord. And then we can get started on this probably this week, I would say. Can just be part of our sprint already, the GraphCDN sprint. Exactly.
All right.
And the other task obviously is mapping the issues here and doing issue triaging. We don't need to do that in this call here, but it's probably good to do that together. Either the two of us or together with Ricky, which is triaging, like cleaning up the existing issues and also making sure that these steps that we have here are documented in issues. And then we can just post this plan here and get feedback from the community. I'm sure we missed something, and there are for sure more steps than just this around like documentation, for example. Yeah. Okay, the modernization, yeah, V2.1, the modernization of GraphiQL. This is exciting. Great. So then we have action items. Then I say thank you, Thomas, for taking the time.
Thank you for moderating this meeting.
Yeah, okay. This will be uploaded, by the way, by Brian Warner and will end up on YouTube in the next days. Okay, good. Thank you.
Have a nice
Bye.
evening.
You too.